This is Join Us in France, episode 31. Hello, I'm Annie.
And I'm Elise.
And we welcome you to the Join Us in France travel podcast. Elise is a professional tour guide, art historian, and a really good storyteller.
Yes.
Now, on today's show, we bring you home. Home to the city of Toulouse. Now, Toulouse is where I was born and raised, so I know it really well. I lived away from Toulouse for about 20 years, but I couldn't stay away. I had to come back. So I guess that's a good sign, right?
That's a good sign.
If you go back.
That's a good sign.
Now, Elise wasn't born here, but she knows Toulouse inside and out and backwards. and better than most of the natives, I would say. Actually, as far as the history is concerned, she knows it a lot better than I do. So she's been leading themed tours of the city for many years. And I've attended many of them, and I can tell you they're always interesting, lively, and I always learn a lot. So thank you for teaching me about my own city.
Yeah, which is now, of course, my adopted new home.
That's right. New.
No, I've been living here for a long time. I've been living here for over 17 years. That's a fair amount of time.
Right. So today she's going to share with us the 7 things that you should not miss when you're in Toulouse.
Among other things, that's right.
Right, among other things. And alternatively, of course, if you're in Toulouse and would like to book a tour with Elise, write to info@joinusinfrance.com and we'll hook you up.
And we'll hook you up indeed.
That's right. And as always, if you can't take notes, you'll find links, show notes, pictures on joinusinfrance / and the number 31. And now a little music to get us in the mood, and we'll come back and talk about Toulouse. Okay, welcome back. Hi, Elise.
Hi, Annie.
So tell me about Toulouse. Tell me something I don't know.
Tell you something you don't know. Well, I thought before we begin with some factual information and things like that, I thought I would begin by just throwing out to you a question, which is a real question, and that is, having lived in Toulouse when you were a young person, having left and having come back, what would you say is the biggest change or difference in Toulouse since your childhood and now?
Well, it's gotten a lot bigger, that's for sure. I find the city is cleaner.
Cleaner?
Yeah, I think so. It was always very lively, like in the evening, the bustling city center. What has changed? It's hard for me to put my finger on it. We have a lot more restaurants. I think it's just a lot more people live here.
A lot more people.
I think it's the city in France that's growing the fastest.
It is one of the cities that is growing the fastest.
Yeah.
There are actually 2 or 3 like that.
Yeah.
And Toulouse, of course, is one of them.
Right. It's a very popular. I don't know if you were planning on mentioning the aerospace industry.
Yeah, right.
But that's just huge. There are a lot of well-paying jobs in Toulouse, and so that's why it's growing.
Okay, I was just wondering.
Universities, of course.
I was actually just wondering if there was some specific thing that struck you, having come back after living in the States for over 20 years, that you noticed or something like that.
Well, probably I didn't notice because I came back every year. I mean, even when I didn't live here, I came back to visit my family. Yeah, at least once a year, sometimes twice. And so, it was gradual.
Right.
But living here as an adult was very different than growing up here.
But, I'm sure.
But I think that would be the same for any place. I mean, you move away when in your late teens and then you don't come back until your 40s.
Right.
Of course, it's going to be different.
Okay.
Yeah.
I was just curious.
Yeah.
All right.
But it's still lovely.
It's still lovely. So let's start at the beginning. Toulouse is considered to be the 4th largest city in France, which is contested by 2 or 3 other cities. There's this kind of strange rivalry. It is Paris, of course, is by far the largest in terms of population and in terms of density. Then you have Marseille and Lyon. And Toulouse is somewhere, whether it's exactly the fourth or it's about the fourth or fifth biggest city, I don't know. But Toulouse is in the middle of the southwest of France, close to the frontier with Spain. That is, it's in the middle east-west between the Mediterranean and the Atlantic. It's almost dead set in the center. It's about 120 kilometers as the crow flies south into the Pyrenees, and then you're actually crossing over the border into Spain. And if you had to go to the Mediterranean, it would be about, by car, which is an easy way for, I think, most people to understand that, it's about an hour and 20 minutes away, or an hour and a half away. And if you have to go to the Atlantic, it's 2.5 hours away. So it is a little bit closer to the east Mediterranean side than to the Atlantic side. But it is not on a coast. It is in the center.
It's landlocked, yeah.
It's a city that has a temperate climate as opposed to a Mediterranean climate. It doesn't get very cold in the winter, but it can get very, very hot because it is landlocked in the summertime. And it's a city that is very, very, very old. It has a history that is one of the most ancient in France. There are obviously other places. We've talked a lot about how old Paris is, and there are a few other cities, Lyon being one of them, and that are very, very old too. And Toulouse is genuinely among these cities because it was actually founded as a city by the Romans when they conquered Gaul. And I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, and as you know, Annie, I could go on forever and ever. But it is important because it is a city that is attractive, physically attractive, for the simple reason that, for reasons that have to do a lot with the history of the Western Europe and the luck of the draw, if you want, it has managed to preserve its old city center. So it's a city, just to give an idea for people out there of its population, they say that it's about 700,000. It's a city, as you mentioned, that is growing very, very quickly, and that has been for the last 30 years or so, thanks to both the aeronautic industry, the space industry, and lots of research and high tech, which is one of the key centers in France for medical research, genetic research, for the weather stations. It's very interesting because it is a city that is known to a lot of people. It is not known as a city that is extremely touristy for pleasure reasons. People think of Nice, they think of various other cities. Many people who have never been to Toulouse think of it as simply a place to go for industry, for high tech.
Right, we get lots. It's
very strange.
Right, we get lots of people who come for work.
For work. And that is one of the reasons why it is such a fast growing city. There's an incoming population that is a steady flow, which is, of course, becomes an urban problem in terms of density and congestion and things like that.
Right.
But I would like to just, I think today what we basically want to do is talk about Toulouse as a tourist attraction, and not necessarily as a place to go look for a job or things like that. So,
although if you're listening to this podcast because you're moving to Toulouse because of a job, well, we're glad to have you anyway.
Glad to have you anyway, right. One of the things that makes Toulouse very famous, and it is quite famous, is that it is called the Rose or Brick City. And that is because the basic...
Wait. It's not called the Brick City. It's called La Ville Rose.
Yeah, but it's also called the Brick City. There are 3 brick cities. There's Toulouse, Albi, and Montauban. There are the 3 brick cities. They make a triangle. And I've heard people refer to it as the Brick City. Other people refer to it as the Rose.
How do they say that in French?
La ville de briques.
I've never heard that in my life.
But it's more English-speaking people that consider it to be the brick city.
Okay.
It's made of this beautiful, beautiful brick, which we can argue about whether it's rose or orange. It's actually it's very interesting because it's what's called the Roman brick, and it was really brought as a technique to this area by the Romans, and the clay in the Garonne Valley, which is the river, the main big river that cuts right through the city of Toulouse, has very rich soil that's very good clay for making terracotta. It's the same terracotta you would see in Rome, basically. It's the same. And the Romans introduced tile making and brick making, and it has become the basic building material of the city and has stayed that way for the last 2,000 years.
Right. And actually, my sister sells traditional handmade Toulouse bricks.
Oh, really?
Yeah, she's one.
She works for one of the briqueteries.
Yes, she does.
That's interesting.
And it's one of the few left that still make a handmade product.
Yes, and of course the irony of that, which I'm sure that she would tell you about anyway, is that in the beginning, and we're talking beginning really meaning basically 2,000 years ago, and all through the Roman times, which lasted for about 400 years, and then through the Middle Ages, which lasted for a lot longer than that, and up through into modern times, brick was the cheap material when there weren't. Since around here there are no quarries, there's no stone quarries, so that's why stone has never been the basic building material here. But brick for a long time was simply cheap, and now if you want to have genuine handmade bricks, it is very, very expensive.
It's very expensive.
It's only for the rich.
Yeah.
It's sort of the irony of history is that what once was just an ordinary material has now become a very exclusive, fancy material.
It's very labor intensive.
It's very labor intensive.
But what happens is for people who select this sort of brick, they all look a little bit different.
Yes,
they don't have this even look.
Machine made.
Yeah, they're not machine made, and so it's more interesting visually. Anyway.
Well, the bricks are, you and I both agree. The brick here is beautiful, and the buildings with the bricks are beautiful. And one of the things that's amazing if you walk around the old city center is that there are still buildings that have the original genuine brick, at least going back about 1,500 years, which is already quite astounding.
Yeah.
So what is Toulouse? Toulouse is a dynamic city. It is a city that is built along the banks of the Garonne, which is one of the major rivers in France. It is a river that opens up and empties into the waters of the Atlantic at Bordeaux. So it's a river that starts in the Pyrenees and goes all the way up to the Gironde, which is the estuary at Bordeaux, and out into the Atlantic Ocean. And thanks to the Romans who decided it was a great place to set up basically what would be a commercial center, not a military outpost, but a commercial center. The center of Toulouse has been in the same place since the Romans arrived here in about 50 BC. And the center of Toulouse is basically in the shape of a heart. It's the form very much like Paris. It's almost circular, but a little bit almost like a heart. And the reason why the old city center has that shape is because that is where the ramparts were that originally surrounded it, starting in the Roman times. And these walls that were there first actually as decorative walls, then became defensive walls in the Middle Ages when there was fighting, the 100 Years' War, basically between the English and the French. They reinforced and rebuilt these walls, and those walls stayed up for so long that other little towns developed on the outside of the walls in various places around, and eventually, but not until actually the 1700s, the people who ran the city got the brilliant idea to finally tear down a good part of these walls because the city was closed in, this very dense medieval city that was extremely densely populated. There was no place for anybody to build. There was no place for anybody to go, literally. And so they opened it up. And so in the place of these walls, you have what we now call the boulevards. And the boulevards are just basically a ring of big open, wide avenues that circle around. And it's very cute because if you take a look at it from above, you would see that it is basically almost a perfect heart shaped. It's kind of cute.
I had never noticed that.
Yeah. Well, there are beautiful maps from the Middle Ages, actually from the 1700s, when they were still enclosed, that show what it was like. And it really is, I've always thought it was very cute, It was a heart-shaped city.
That's cute.
And it's made out of brick. Most of the old buildings, there are a lot of beautiful buildings that are half timbered, the small private houses that are still half timbered. But one of the reasons why Toulouse is such a wonderful place to visit, and unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, I guess it's a question of what point of view you have. It's whether people think it's a good or bad thing. It doesn't have the hordes of tourists that you have in other places in France. Right. So when people come here, they're always so astonished how beautiful it is. And at the same time, they realize that they're lucky because you don't have these hordes everywhere. And so you can appreciate the things when you walk around. The old city center has a whole section with these lovely little narrow streets, very medieval streets. There's a part of it that's tiny houses that are all half timbered. And then there's a part that's filled with these magnificent mansions starting from the 16 and 1700s. It's basically a city where there's one road that cuts through the middle. And basically on one side, it was the old craftspeople who became affluent in the Middle Ages. And on the other side, it was the aristocratic landowners who built these larger houses. But what it gives you is this richness of old architecture everywhere that basically starts 1,000 years ago and works your way all the way up into beautiful examples of 19th century very elaborate sculpted architecture. It's a city that in its old city center is not very big. So it's wonderful to do a visit there because you can do everything by foot.
Right.
Or if you want to, you could actually get a bike. But it's not so big, so you can actually do the whole city center in a few hours.
Yeah, it's very walkable.
It's very, very walkable.
Even for daily life. I mean, anymore, the city center, a lot of the major streets in the city center are highly restricted for cars.
Now, they're more and more,
Right, so only people who reside on those streets, they have these big metal posts
to keep people from parking,
that go up and down, and if you have a pass, it'll open for you, but if you don't have a pass, forget it. Yeah, well, that's interesting, because of course, as Toulouse has had this influx of population, and as we mentioned, you come back, and I have literally been living here now longer than you have in this last time, which is 17 years. I have seen enormous changes. And one of the things that has happened is that a lot of the streets have been closed off. A lot of them have made semi-pedestrian. Correct, yes.
Which is very strange because it's kind of an oxymoron being semi-pedestrian, It's like you can only get certain people if they have shops or if they live there, they can get their cars through. Basically. And it has brought in a lot more people because it makes it a lot easier to walk around the old city center.
Well, Toulouse residents always liked going downtown. It's always been something that you did. You do that. You go into the city. Why are you going into the city? Oh, just
well, that's what I do. I do that. It's like I think I'm just going to take a walk around. I mean, first of all, I think one of the things, and this is just me, it's my adopted home, and I love Paris. I work in Paris a lot. I go up to Paris very often. Paris is one of the most beautiful cities in the world as far as I'm concerned. There are endless corners of Paris that I have yet to discover, and it goes on and on. But I love living in Toulouse. It's beautiful. It's not very big. It's wonderful to get a sense of history, to get a sense of art. And at the same time, it's not overwhelming.
Right.
It's just not overwhelming. So it's a wonderful place to visit, and it's a wonderful place to live. Now, it's also wonderful because it is second to Paris. It has the largest university population in France. Really, really, really.
Yeah.
Which means that with its university, with the science schools, with the medical schools, with the business schools, with everything that you would consider to be, college level and up, it has over 100,000 students.
Right.
And what does that do? That makes it a wonderful, as you said, very lively city. It has enormous amounts of music. It has enormous amounts of theater. Unbelievable. It has wonderful movies. We get the movies here at the same time that they are showing in the Cannes Film Festival.
Right.
Before they open up in major cities sometimes. Movies from all over the world. It's got over 1,000 restaurants. Literally. And so it's and therefore obviously it's a great place to be, and it's a great place to visit. And and of course in the summer, like in many other places in France, there are music festivals, dance festivals. A lot of things happen along the banks of the river, especially in the summertime. And being that it's a city that is not close to the sea, one of the nice things is that the banks of the river have been set up so that they are very user-friendly, and it's very nice in the summertime because if you really are in it's on a very hot day, it's a place to go. You get this nice breeze off of the Garonne River.
Yeah.
And so it really is a very, very nice thing to do.
Well, and they do this thing in Toulouse that they also do in Paris.
The beach.
Toulouse plage, and
Toulouse
they do
plage,
Paris plage, where they bring in huge amounts of sea sand.
Right.
And
they set up fake palm trees. And,
and recreate a beach atmosphere with activities for the kids. And
they're actually, it's a lot of fun. And what's nice about it is that everything is free.
Yeah.
And they set up a lot of things for people to bring their children to part of the banks. There's a part of the stretch of the river where it's really flat and meadow-like. And so it's very nice. You don't swim in this river, though. I mean, you don't swim in the Garonne River.
No.
But it is a very lovely thing, and it really sort of lightens things up and clears up the air, in a sense. What makes Toulouse special? It's beautiful. It's physically just beautiful. It's not very big. It's made with this beautiful orange, red, rose brick, whichever color you think it is. It actually changes color according to the time of the day and the light. Some days it's sunny, sometimes it's cloudy. It's got this magnificent old historical center that takes you back as far as over 1,000 years ago. And it's very, very beautiful to walk around, and you get a sense almost of a capsule history of everything that's happened in France for so long.
Right.
And that's one of the things that's so nice. And very often people come to Toulouse as a way of getting somewhere else. They land in Toulouse airport because they're going to go east, west, north, or south. And what happens is if they stay at least a day or two, they discover how wonderful Toulouse actually is, and they get to visit it. So maybe what we should do is we're going to mention just some of the most special things, the things that you shouldn't miss.
Right.
If you are going to come to Toulouse.
The 7 things.
7. Did I say 7? Oh, I have to count. Let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Well, 7 things that are global. I guess we have to include a few other things under the subcategories of the 7 things. There are 2 or 3 what we could call monuments, but maybe it's better to say places or buildings that are considered to be the key and most important elements of any central visit to the old city center. And the oldest structure still standing is a church, and that is a church called Saint-Sernin. And it is a building that is right now, today, my math is not that good, but it's 975 years old.
Yeah, it's very old.
It's very old.
It's very nice.
It's very beautiful.
Saint-Sernin is probably my favorite place to take people.
In all of Toulouse? Because,
2 places I always take people is Saint-Sernin et Salle des Illustres. I don't know if you were going to mention that.
Yeah, we'll talk about the capital.
Yeah. But those are the 2 places because they're different and they are just beautiful. You know?
They're very well. Saint-Sernin is very special. To try and summarize something that is very difficult to do, especially for someone like me who spends time taking people around and telling all the stories and the details of all of these things. But obviously, France is a country that is filled with castles and churches and beautiful old villages. So there is no lack of them anywhere you go. But one of the things that makes Saint-Sernin so magnificent and very special is its architecture. It is a Romanesque church, which is a very special style of architecture, and it's not very high. It's not one of these peaked Gothic churches. It's it's low to the ground, with beautiful rounded forms, and it's made of stone and brick in the old Roman style, which is why things like that are actually called Romanesque. That's the reason why. And it was started in the year 1075, and it's a pilgrimage church. And one of the things that makes it very special, both on the outside, on the inside, it is absolutely gorgeous. It is really beautiful and very, very special, not only for the ancient, genuine, genuine sculpture that still exists on the outside and on the inside, but because it was a new idea of architectural structure designed to accommodate a maximum number of pilgrims. So if you go inside, which is, of course, something that is really recommended to do, you will see that the structure of it is designed for the flow of people in and out of the church. And so it's really quite special. And it was the inspiration for many other churches after that. And it is, Toulouse is on the road of one of the major pilgrimages from the year 1000, which is the road to Saint-Jacques de Compostelle, which is in Spain, in Santiago de Compostelle. And it became a major pilgrimage stop, and that is the reason why this church was built.
Right.
And the building we see today has had a little work done in terms of renovation, but basically it is the same building that was started in the year 1075.
Right. And the crochet... So clocher, how do you say that in English?
The church tower.
The tower is really unique.
It's unique. It was the first. It's a layer cake.
Yeah, I guess.
It's what I call a layer cake.
Yeah.
Made out of brick, and it's actually a 5-tiered wedding cake, as far as I'm concerned. But absolutely beautiful. The church is really gorgeous. I mean,
I'll put pictures on the website.
There's no way of explaining and how different it is from Gothic architecture like Notre Dame and all of those other beautiful cathedrals in the north. It's a
nothing
different
like
style.
Notre Dame. Yeah,
No.
it's nothing like it.
It's closer to Italian or early Italian style architecture. If you go and see some of the churches in Italy, like in Siena or other places like that, you will see churches that are very similar. Right now, it is considered to be the largest Romanesque church left in Western Europe. And of course, it is still a church.
Yes,
and it's a wonderful place to go to listen to concerts.
They do concerts.
They do
there,
concerts.
Weddings, funerals.
They do gospel concerts. They do organ concerts. They do singing choir concerts, as you well know.
Yeah.
It's a wonderful, wonderful place, and it is one of the places that should not be missed when you visit Toulouse.
Yeah.
Even if you just go around the outside and don't even take the time to go inside, just the outside is beautiful.
Yeah, is it worth going into the treasure? I don't remember that there was anything that special in there.
It's worth going into, as a lot of other churches have. You pay, of course, in this case, €2. It has a lot of relics of saints, which is one of the things connected to the whole history of pilgrimages, which is a kind of special kind of story. Anyway.
Yeah.
If you're not really, really interested in that, I would say no, it's not worth it. It's not.
That's when you can
special.
skip, I think.
Right. And then, of course, the second place that you really shouldn't miss, no matter what, is not only the Capitol Square, which is the center of all activity in Toulouse, but the magnificent City Hall building, which is called the Capitole, and the space that you just mentioned, which is called the Salle des Illustres. The Capitol Square is geographically actually not the center, the epicenter of Toulouse, but it's the center of all activity. It's a huge open square which has hotels and wonderful cafes and brasseries all the way around it.
Right.
It's very mineral. There are no trees on it, but it's a huge square.
Right, but there's always something going on the square.
2 hectares. Did you know that?
No, I didn't know, but it's big. And
it's big.
There's always something going on. There's always some sort of market or expo of some sort.
Well, everything that's important seems to happen. In other words, if there's a demonstration for some kind of political cause, it happens on the square. If there's a celebration for the 14th, for the Bastille Day, if it's the championship for rugby or soccer, they have put up a giant screen.
Right.
If it's a party, last month there was a day for circus, because there are lots of circus schools in the region around Toulouse. And they had a procession that entered into the city. And on the Capitol Square, they did this gorgeous acrobatic performance for a half an hour with these people dressed like angels with feathers on them. I mean,
yeah, I don't think a day goes by that there isn't some sort
something.
of activity going on in the city center, which makes it one of the reasons why people who live in the area, they'll just go to Toulouse just cause.
Just cause.
Like we live on the outskirts in a village nearby because I enjoy quiet and I have a hard time with city noises. But my daughter is constantly going into the city with her friends.
Right.
So they just take the bus and what are you going to do in the city? Oh, I don't know.
We're just going to walk around.
Going to walk around,
It's
look
lively.
around. Yeah.
And of course, it's a city that has lots and lots of young people.
Yeah.
So it is
Yeah.
really fun. And in fact, of course, for me, after all my years of living in France, I hate the first 2 weeks of August. If I have to be here, I hate it
dead.
because it's dead. Because
Yeah.
half the stores are closed, all the students have gone.
Yeah, nothing happens.
It's boring. It's
Yeah.
just boring,
Yeah.
you know. And if you really want to have life, I mean, you just sort of, I keep saying, oh, well, when do the students come back, you know?
Yeah, we'll have to podcast about this someday, but it's true that the rhythm of life in France is really linked to
School
the
year
school
and
year.
vacation.
And
yeah.
as soon as the kids go on vacation, all the associations, all the choirs stop,
Everything stops.
Everything stops. And so there's not that much happening
No.
in a minor city, in a city like Toulouse.
Well, in a city like Toulouse, which
Yeah.
of course is not Paris, right?
Right.
So the Capitol Square has
Yeah.
this gorgeous city hall that is a building. It's called classical architecture. It's lovely. It's also made with brick and stone, and it has these magnificent marble columns on the outside. And there's a whole story about the building of this building, which started actually in 1750 and took about 125 years to finish. And it replaced what were very old, disparate little buildings that were the buildings of the city council, which is basically the authority that ran Toulouse for many, many centuries. And inside this new city hall, which is what it's called, even though, of course, for Americans and Australians, new would be the last 20 years. Here we're talking the last 150 years ago. Inside, as an intentional thing, and it's quite amazing. And in fact, we'll be going there in a couple of days for the Franco-American reception that they do with champagne for the 4th of July, which is also very nice.
Yeah, it's very nice. The mayor of Toulouse has been throwing this party for Americans for years,
right.
For the 4th of July. And we all get invited, and it's a champagne party
champagne.
with lovely, lovely food, and all the presidents of various, the American Chamber of Commerce,
Right.
and various different groups like that make speeches. And it's a really
It's fun.
good, yeah.
So this is what happened was, and I'm not sure if this is true in other cities as much because it's very special as part of the history of Toulouse. But when this building was being finished, the city council, which is really quite all powerful here, made a decision to create this magnificent reception area. That's a gallery as opposed to a room, which means that it's quite long. It's about 90 meters long. And it is designed to be a copy of a Renaissance palace in Rome, the Farnese Palace, which is actually a building that is the property of, it's owned by Italy, but it's run by the French because it's where the French have their Prix de Rome. Donc, so it's run by the ambassador of France in Rome. And so this is absolutely magnificent, enormous gallery with gilt and painting on the ceiling that is all inspired by Renaissance architecture. And there are statues everywhere, and there are more marble columns, and there are everything in this space, which is really quite magnificent, is dedicated to the history of Toulouse.
Right. That's
it
why
is
it's
in
called,
honor of the history of Toulouse.
So it's called Salle des Illustres. So it's the it's the room where they put illustrious people.
Illustrious
I
people
guess would
and
be the-
illustrious events, because of course some of
yeah,
the
yeah.
events, and of course and it's beautiful. It's really, really beautiful. Now, some people, they gasp when they come in because they think, oh my goodness, I didn't expect to see something like this here. You don't really imagine that this is what it looks like when you walk in, because the outside is very elegant and simple with brick and stone. But the other thing, and this of course is very special, is that in France, because if you want to be married, you must have a civil ceremony. You can have religious ceremony in a church or in any other kind of institution. However, it's not a legal marriage unless you have a civil ceremony.
That's right.
And Toulouse, being only in terms of the world, what we could call a medium-sized city, it doesn't have sub-mayors' offices in different places, which is true in Marseille, Lyon, and of course in Paris. So if you want to be married and you live in Toulouse, you must go to City Hall. And City Hall is not like going to City Hall in the States, where it's kind of this horrible little gray office and there's this person behind a counter. No. It's going into the Salle des Illustres.
Right. It's a really nice place.
It's beautiful.
But of course, the problem with it is that there's so many of them, especially on a Saturday.
Oh, in the spring.
You have to go fast. I mean, it's like one wedding party after another. They get 15 minutes, maybe 20.
This is the deal. It starts in May, June, and July. Normally, during the rest of the year, you have 3 days a week when there are marriage ceremonies: Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. In May, June, and July, they do them every day of the week except Sunday and Monday. Mm-hmm. And you sign up for a time. It's kind of like having a doctor's appointment, you know? Yes. So, 10, 10:30, 11. I think it's every half hour.
Oh, every half hour.
Half hour. And what happens is, if you really want to gape at people in the wedding parties, sometimes it's women, especially the younger ones, if it's the first time around, it's in these gorgeous, elaborate wedding gowns, because what they do is they do the ceremony there and then they wind up going off somewhere else for the party that's usually right afterwards.
Or the religious ceremony.
Or
both.
I've seen them both. I've seen people go from there to the Cathedral Saint-Étienne to do a religious ceremony. Mm-hmm. So you can actually people watch and check out all the wedding gowns and everything. Mm-hmm. And of course, just like, I don't know why, this is a good question, the tradition of June weddings, which of course exists in the States and everything anyway. So May, June, and July, that's the way it is. And of course, what happens is, because of that, those 3 months, it's sometimes difficult to get in to visit the Salle des Illustres, because when there are ceremonies, they don't want tourists milling around. So you have
Although my tourists always mill around because you have to split up.
You have to split up. Right. You can't be a group.
Right. If it's a group,
right.
they won't let you in. But
no.
One at a time, if you're dressed nicely, they think you might be with a wedding party.
Yeah. Well, you have to get disguised then to go in. But the fact is, it's really kind of fun. So City Hall is also really one of the nice places to visit. And then you have another very famous building that is called the Jacobin. And the Jacobin is, it's referred to by people here as a church because that is what it was.
But it's not anymore.
But theoretically, now this is it gets a little bit kind of complicated. Theoretically, it is not. It's a historical monument. It is open every day of the year except the 1st of May. Because nothing is open on the 1st of May, because that's Labor Day and nobody is supposed to work, so that's why it's closed.
That's right.
It is a building that was built 150 years after Saint-Sernin. It is entirely made of brick. It's quite impressive to see because of that. And it's very similar, for instance, to the cathedral in Albi.
Right.
Being that it's made out of all brick. 100% brick, nothing but brick.
It's reminiscent of Albi, the exterior anyway.
Right. Yeah. And of course, it's a similar style, which is a style that's very unique to the southwest of France. But what makes this building rather special is that it's part of a structure that was actually a monastery. And it was the monastery of the Order of the Dominicans, which were created actually in Toulouse in the beginning of the 1200s. And of course, the Dominicans as a religious order for the Roman Catholic Church are still extremely important in the world. I have actually taken groups of Dominicans from various places in the world who've come to Toulouse because they know that this is where the Dominican order was created.
Oh, wow.
And it's a whole long story, which really deserves a special podcast to talk about the church and the whole history of all of this. But what is important to know is that like the Saint-Saëns Church and like part of the capital or city hall, it is very, very beautiful on the inside.
Yeah.
And unlike a lot of the monasteries in France and a lot of the monasteries that existed before the French Revolution in Toulouse, the monastery buildings that are attached to the church called the Jacobin are still standing.
Yeah.
And they are very, very beautiful, and they are visitable.
Yeah,
visitable.
There's a very nice cloister.
There's a wonderful cloister.
I think you have to pay a couple of euros to get in.
You have to pay €3.
But it's well worth it. I mean, that you should do.
However, what's interesting to know is, for instance, at the various times of the year when there are special festivals, for instance, we just had a month of a contemporary art festival in Toulouse, which included artwork set up in the monastery part of the Jacobin. Mm-hmm. When there is anything like that, the access to the cloister is free.
Oh, yeah.
Because you are allowed to go in and out.
You're not going to come at that time just so you won't
pay
the €3.
But every year there are 2-3 months when there are various activities.
Yeah.
And there's a big structure in the back that is now used for contemporary art exhibits, which are very interesting usually. And we're very lucky because the cloister is really quite beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Now, historically,
it is simple, but it's beautiful.
Yeah. Those are 3 places that I single out specifically. Other than that, what you have to see as you walk around Toulouse, and obviously this is something to do either with a guide like me or with a guide in the sense of walking around with a paper that gives you the names of different things or streets or whatever. There is a huge collection of magnificent Renaissance mansions in Toulouse.
Yeah.
That go from small to medium to huge in size that are absolutely exquisite. Now, you don't go inside them, but you
because we still have rich people that live there.
We still have people that live there, or they've been converted into private apartments.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't go in, but you can go into the courtyards.
That's right.
And some of them are just beautiful facades that you can see walking up and down different streets. The oldest civil house in Toulouse.
What do you mean by civil?
As opposed to church or administration.
Okay?
I see. Yeah. In other words, where a person lived.
Yeah.
The oldest house is in a section close to the cathedral, and it's a house that is actually, believe it or not, from the end of the 1300s. It's on the Rue Croix-Baragnon.
Croix-Baragnon.
Yeah, and it's actually
I know the one.
Gothic style.
Yeah.
But it's unique in that it was renovated. Other than that,
Croix-Baragnon is where you go if you want to spend a lot of money on.
If you want to go to the fanciest shops in Toulouse.
Yeah, very fancy shops.
Very beautiful, chic
designers,
area.
Clothes, that kind of thing.
That's right.
Yeah.
We don't have a huge neighborhood like in Paris. We just have one street like that. But we do have some neighborhoods with some nice shops anyway. But there is a huge selection of magnificent houses from the Middle Ages and from the Renaissance. And some of them have gorgeous doorways. Some of them have gorgeous courtyards. And in and of itself, that is a whole visit to Toulouse. It's just wonderful to walk around and see all of this.
Yeah.
It really is. And besides that, one of the things that I think is wonderful to do is walk along the banks of the river.
Yeah.
Now, you can start, there are 2 or 3 bridges that are part of basically the city center of Toulouse. You can start at one end, for instance, at the bridge called Saint-Pierre, and you can work your way down. Actually, it's upstream, but you're working your way down, going south. And you go past, the banks have been set up so that it's lovely to walk along them. And you get a view of the river. If you go at the end of the day, you have a gorgeous sunset on the river. You have magnificent houses that are both houses from the 1800s and then earlier medieval houses. There are a couple of places that are kind of special with little secrets that are really nice to sort of find out about along the way. And then you get to a bridge.
But for those, you're going to have to hire
You have to hire me. I'm not going to tell you anyway. You have to hire us. You get to the Pont Neuf, which, like in Paris, means the new bridge, which by definition means it's the oldest bridge. because nobody calls bridges the Pont Neuf anymore. Now, if they build a new bridge, they give it a name. They don't just say, "Oh, the new bridge," how unoriginal as a name. But in the Middle Ages, for whatever reason, that's the way they named the bridge, and it happens to be a bridge from the 1500s that is absolutely gorgeous. To me, it's one of the most beautiful things to see in Toulouse.
Yeah.
Day or night, it has a reflection on the water that's just absolutely wonderful, with gorgeous arches, and it's very special because it is literally the only bridge that Toulouse has ever built that has lasted 500 years and has not been washed away by floods.
Yeah. No, it's very nice looking.
It's beautiful.
And it's a good area. Now, one caveat is that it's also the area that a lot of it can be a little bit grungy. So
not on that side. On the other side. No. If you walk along the quay up above, I'm not saying walking along down below on the actual edge of the water.
Oh, okay.
If you stay up above on the sidewalk, that's up above where the walls are. No, it's not grungy at all, and it's really lovely.
Down below.
People don't understand what we're talking about because the walk along the river, you have a walkway up above, and then you have a huge retaining wall that was actually built in the 1770s to prevent flooding on the good side. This is actually what would be considered to be the good side of town in the river. It's literally the right bank flowing away, and down below on that side you have spots where you have grass and some benches that literally comes right up to the edge of the water.
Yeah.
And there, what you have is you have a combination of tourists, of lots of students. It depends on the time of the year and it depends on the time of the day. But it is true that unfortunately along that section down below, at night, there are places where you get people who do a lot of drinking. It gets to be sometimes some young homeless people, but up above, there's no problem.
That's a good point.
It's really nice, and you can walk without any problem, and there are lovely cafes along the way. You can stop and everything else, and you can go past that as far. You can continue, and it's really quite a lovely walk, as far as a bridge called the Saint-Michel Bridge. And if you go from one of those, from Saint-Pierre to the Pont Neuf to the Saint-Michel, you basically are covering the city center, and you have a way of glimpsing pieces of the history of Toulouse all the way along the way. It's a wonderful walk. It's a walk that I love to do. And between that and seeing the bridge and walking in the old neighborhoods around there with the old medieval and Renaissance mansions, it's really, really, really lovely thing to do. Now, there are two other things that I think are really special in Toulouse. One of them is that we have the famous Canal du Midi.
Yes.
Which begins in Toulouse.
We podcasted about that.
We podcasted about the Canal du Midi.
Yeah.
It actually starts in Toulouse, and there are small sections of it along in Toulouse.
I think that was episode 21.
Oh, you're good at knowing the numbers. I have no idea. There's a section of the river of the canal where you can actually get on a little boat and do a little boat ride up and down for about an hour. And it's really lovely. And there's also, there's still what they call a capitainerie. There are a couple of barges that are there permanently. And so you can take a look and see what they were like. And there are other people who moor their boats there. And it's a nice little section. It's a little bit behind the dead city center, but it's really lovely. And it's a lovely walk to do. It takes you a little bit up the canal. You get to see where there are some people who live on their barges, and there are a couple of places that have turned barges into restaurants. And you get to an area where it's very residential and very, very lovely. And then the other thing is, it's not famous in a sense for it, but it's really something that I've come to appreciate more and more, and that is the parks.
Oh, yeah.
There are some just beautiful parks in Toulouse. They are obviously not as old as the Renaissance mansions or the bridges or things like that. But we have in Toulouse two beautiful parks that are actually from the very end of the 1700s. And that is a park that's not very big, but it's gorgeous, called the Royal Park.
Yeah.
And right next to it, across the way, is the Jardin des Plantes, which is the equivalent, of course, it translates as botanical garden, but it's not really what it is, because there's a part of it that is really genuinely a botanical garden. It's connected to the museum.
I think it used to have a more of botanical garden.
Yeah.
When I was little, there was zoo animals.
That's right. Oh, you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, that's
I
funny.
remember
That's interesting because it. Do you know when they ended? They ended in the end of the 1970s.
So, see, I was really young.
So you were really young,
yeah.
right? Because in doing the research about the parks, it turns out that the reason they got rid of most of them, of course, now what do they have? They have peacocks, they have ducks,
Right.
they have basically poultry. I mean, they have feathered animals. But it turns out that from the time that it was set up as a big park, and it is a gorgeous, gorgeous park, there were animals because there was a part that was supposed to be a little zoo, and there was a part that was a genuine botanical garden, and there are still places where there are plaques on the trees that tell you, but there is a closed-off botanical garden next to a hothouse. But it turns out that by the middle of the 20th century, the area around the park, which is very posh, the people started complaining about the smells.
Yeah, well.
And so they had donkeys, they had apparently monkeys, they had
Yes, I
cows,
remember monkeys, yep.
They had all kinds of farm animals, and they had other animals. I think they even said they had a zebra. Very strange.
I don't remember lions or tigers.
No.
But I do remember monkeys.
There were monkeys, and there were apparently either a giraffe or zebras. There were animals that basically were not ferocious, but that were definitely exotic.
Yeah.
And what happened was that apparently there were a group of people who set up a petition, and they got rid of them. I hope they gave them to a zoo somewhere.
Well, and after that, we started going to the zoo outside of the city.
Right.
Right. But
But
anyway.
it is a gorgeous, gorgeous park.
Yeah, there's some nice parks.
And then, of course, there's another one that is actually more recent, but it's really one that I think is gorgeous, and that is a park called the Park of Compense Caffarelli.
Oh, yeah.
And in the middle of that, there is a magnificent Japanese imperial garden.
Yeah, the
that
Japanese
has won
garden is
awards.
nice. Yeah.
So for a city that doesn't have the beach, it doesn't have the sea, it has the banks of the river, and it has some of these absolutely lovely parks. And for people who, I have a lot of people who ask me if they can do a visit of the parks, interestingly enough. I guess after a while, walking around streets and narrow medieval streets and looking at houses, they want to see some greenery.
And there's also the park attached to
The abattoir.
Oh, that's not... Well, yeah, there's that. But there's also the one attached to the Natural History Museum.
That's the Jardin des Plantes.
Ah, okay. That's the one you meant. Okay.
Yeah.
I was thinking Grand Rond. I think the animals were on the Grand Rond.
Which is part of it. It's just that they separated them by a road. They actually
okay.
separated them. But that was also... Those were the original first open public parks in Toulouse, which was at a time when the idea of a public park was developing anywhere. It was just before that, only rich people had parks,
right.
greenery, And then there's just one last thing to mention, and that is the markets.
Oh, yeah.
The markets, there are 3 covered markets that are really interesting in Toulouse. One is quite big, one is medium size, and one is quite small. But they're fun to visit. They're only open, of course, on mornings and every day of the week except Mondays. That's the tradition in Toulouse. And if you want to see, these are food markets. These are not flea markets. This is food markets. They're really fun because you get to see all the local foods, what people eat, and it's very bustling and very, very fresh food. And they're really kind of fun to visit if you want to see the way people used to mostly shop, because, of course, now only people who live dead center, I think, in the city, and to have the time actually do that more than just occasionally.
Right. Occasionally I'll go and buy something from one of these covered markets, but it's not very common. I live too far away.
You live too far away, and even me, it would mean taking the metro in, and it's, you do it once in a while.
Yeah.
So there are 2 special weekend markets, and one of them is the flea market around Saint-Sernin, which has degraded in the last few years. It used to be a real genuine flea market. Now I would say, it's not worth in terms of the quality of the things. Most of the antique things have moved out, and it's too bad because it used to be a lot of fun. And the very fun, very big market around another church called Saint-Aubin Sunday mornings, which is really fun because if you want to understand what it's like to be someone from Toulouse, it's a wonderful place to go because you have food, clothing, crafts. You have the old peasants who bring in their vegetables. You can tell by their hands that they're the ones who've dug them up out of the ground. You have people who are basically middlemen who are resellers of, all kinds of things. You have poultry. You have live rabbits. You have people busking, singing songs. It's really an event, and it's to me the perfect symbol of life in Toulouse. It's kind of laid back compared to the capital, Paris. It's fun. It's kind of user-friendly. You can tell I like Toulouse a lot. There's a lot to do and see. And we're not going to talk today about them because we're going to go back and talk about these things in detail.
Right.
Toulouse is only has a few museums. There are 2 or 3 that I think are really special. One of them is an archaeology museum called Saint Raymond. Another is the Augustin, which is a museum of medieval art, and it's really worth visiting. It has a modern and contemporary art museum called the Abattoir, which means the slaughterhouse, because the building was converted. That is very interesting as a building, sometimes has interesting things on the inside, but it's very recent. It's only from the year 2000, and when they reconverted the building, they redid the site around it, and they took what was industrial wasteland and turned it into a gorgeous park that goes up to the banks of the river. So it's a very nice place to walk around and visit. And of course, besides that, 2 things that are visitable that are not directly inside the city, and that is the Airbus factory.
Oh, yeah.
Which you can visit by appointment. You have to reserve ahead of time.
Right.
Which is very interesting because you get to see the assembling of various airplanes.
Mm-hmm. Oh, and I think soon they're going to do a museum. Of aircraft.
That's right.
Because Toulouse has a long, long history of airplanes.
Of aviation.
Yeah, and Antoine de Saint-Exupéry.
Right.
And which is the one who wrote The Little Prince.
Right. Aviation basically started in Toulouse. In all of France, it started in Toulouse.
Yeah,
I don't know when they're going to be opening up. It's not yet finished.
No,
but they should be.
But it's going to be a big one. And also we have the
Cité de l'Espace.
Right, Cité de l'Espace, which is very good to go visit if you have young children. Young teenagers between 8 and 14.
Right.
I think is ideal.
It's very interactive.
Yeah, it's interactive. They have a nice big 3D movie theater.
They have a space capsule. You can go in and see how claustrophobic you would be inside it.
They have a replica of a Mir station.
Yes, they do. Have a missile.
Yeah, they have a bunch
lot
of things.
It's very interesting. I think I agree with you. It's a great thing to do, especially when you have children. Although I must say,
even
a few years ago, I took my mom there, who doesn't know anything about anything in terms of science or anything. And a lot of the interactive things you can do about weather, about the moon, phases of the moon, about the ocean, and
the planets.
Really, really, really interesting and a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So,
the other one that I like is the Natural History Museum.
Yeah.
They redid it, and I think they did a good job.
They did a very good job.
I've seen better ones other places, but it's better than it used to be.
Well, guess what? It actually is famous for having an excellent collection of things from prehistoric times, and also a very, very good collection of skeletons of various animals, including dinosaurs. So it is a nice. It's not.
No, it's a good one.
It's a nice one.
It's
very popular, actually, and they have wonderful events. I just was there a few weeks ago. They had a special exhibit that just ended on bears. On the history of bears in Europe. So it's very nice. And it is, as you mentioned, in the park. Yeah. So it's a nice thing, especially if you are with children.
Yes.
It's a very nice thing to do.
Yes.
So basically, we have lots of things to do and see in Toulouse. Maybe we should just make a quick mention of some of the things that people like to eat in the area, which are really... Obviously now people eat the same things pretty much all over France, but these are things that genuinely come from around here.
Yeah.
And basically, let's say that the basic staple meat is duck.
Yes.
Everything you can do with a duck.
Yes. Lots of duck meat.
Lots of duck meat. Lots of duck meat.
Of course, cassoulet.
Cassoulet
is a local.
Which is local in the sense that it comes from here, comes from Carcassonne. It's a local thing made with sausage and duck and beans. But really one of the staple things of the area is, of course, duck, which means duck breast, duck leg, foie gras, everything duck. It's very common. Lots of cheese that it comes from the Pyrenees. Mm-hmm. So there's a fair amount of sheep's cheese and other kinds of cheese too, but definitely lots of cheeses that come from the Pyrenees. Mm-hmm. Lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. We're in a major fruit and vegetable growing area, one of the largest in all of France.
Yep.
We are not in the center of a wine growing area. We are close to a few places that grow wines that are not too far away. They're only about 35, 40 minutes away.
Yep.
Like the Gaillac area or the Corbière area.
But Fronton.
Or the Fronton. And it's basically known, interestingly enough, in the Southwest, not just Toulouse itself, but the whole Southwest, to be the part of France where people have the healthiest diet based on olive oil, based on lots of fruits and vegetables. And statistically, there's less heart problems in the Southwest of France than anywhere else.
So maybe eating duck and beans is good for
duck
you.
And beans and a little red wine and lots of fruits and vegetables is very, very good for you. It sounds. I think I'm getting hungry.
It is lunchtime.
It's lunchtime. How do you get to Toulouse? If you are in Paris, you can get to Toulouse by plane. There are about 7 or 8 shuttles every single day.
Yeah.
It's about an hour and 10-minute flight.
That's definitely the easiest way.
It's definitely the easiest way.
Because Toulouse is an airplane city. So they have put a lot of money into the airport, not as much into the train station.
Well, the trains, of course, we are the one city that's a major city in France that is still not served by the bullet train.
Right.
So it's a 5.5-hour train ride if you go through Bordeaux, which is the quickest train ride you can do, which some people still like to do because you have time to relax and read if you're not in a hurry. You get to see some nice countryside.
And you arrive in the center, you know.
And you arrive in the dead center.
So
that's right.
I don't think you waste a lot of time. I mean, actually, in terms of having to get to the airport early and all the check-in rigmarole and the flight, which is an hour and 20 minutes, and then getting your luggage back and all that, it probably would take you maybe 4 hours.
I fly in and out from Paris to France for work a lot. And I go to Orly, which is the smaller airport to the south of Paris, as opposed to Charles de Gaulle. Mm-hmm. It actually is shorter to fly because when you do the shuttle, you don't have to be there that much earlier. And once you get your stuff, let's say it cuts off about an hour and a half.
Okay.
It does. But literally door to door, you know.
Yeah.
But it's also that it doesn't feel as long because you're not sitting in a train for 5.5 hours.
Right.
Whereas, of course, the advantage of the train is that you get off really in the heart of the city of Paris or in the city of Toulouse. And from there, you can literally walk almost anywhere you want to go or get on a bus and go there.
I guess you could drive too.
You can, but it's far.
It's a long
drive.
drive.
It's about 800 kilometers.
Yeah.
And that is a straight drive if you don't do any getting off the road, going to visit things along the way, which of course is the huge temptation anyway. But you can come from Bordeaux. It's a 2.5-hour train ride or a short plane ride. You can come from Marseille. You can come even from Nice. You can get on a plane and get here from Nice or from Lyon. So it's a place you can get to from various other cities in France. And of course, the majority of people, I think, arrive basically coming from Paris. Yeah. But you can even come up from Barcelona.
Yeah.
You know, by train and by plane.
Yeah, now they have this fast train to Toulouse to Barcelona. I think it's 3 hours.
Is that what it is? It's 3 hours.
Yeah, it's really good.
Even 1 hour and 15 minute flight direct from Madrid is possible.
Yeah. So there's lots of ways to get to Toulouse. It's not difficult to get to.
So it's a definite place to discover.
Yeah.
We hope that you come here and that you love it as much as we do.
And take a tour with Elise. This is your chance. She's always here, you know. So
except when I'm in Paris.
Well, yes. She goes to Paris a fair amount, but you're here more than in Paris.
I love it. Yeah, and I love being able to take people on tours here in Toulouse.
Yeah.
And talk.
Right. So info@joinusinfrance.com for
I forgot.
You forgot?
I forgot.
What?
We have to tell them.
What?
Lonely Planet.
Oh.
Just listed Toulouse as one of the top 10 destinations.
That's right.
For this coming year.
That's right.
So don't just believe us, believe Lonely Planet as well.
That's right. No, it's a really nice place. Yeah, there's no doubt that you need to come. We're not just saying that because we're from here. I mean,
No, we're really not.
we're not the only ones who think that, which is reassuring.
And we didn't pay Lonely Planet to put it in either.
No,
We
not
really
that
didn't.
rich.
No. No, really. They did say you have to come and discover this wonderful city. So.
That's great. All right. That's it. You
That's
didn't
it.
forget anything else?
Oh, there's lots of things, but that's enough.
All right. Well, thank you very much. We will talk to you again next week. And don't forget, listeners, to write us reviews, email us, I don't know, join our Facebook group.
Ask us questions.
Yeah, ask us questions. We like that.
We like that.
We like to interact with our listeners as much as possible. But seeing that it's a podcast, podcasts are famous for people like to listen, and then they're done listening and they move on to something else.
That's right.
And it's not as, as communicative.
Send us a Facebook question.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. We'll talk to you next Saturday.
See you.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.
Thank you.